This might be the strangest compliment I can give a 70-200, but the first thing this lens makes you think is, wait, where did the weight go? Because Nikon took one of the most important workhorse lenses in the Z system and somehow made it feel less like a gym membership and more like something you'd actually want to carry all day. And the wild part is, they didn't do that by turning it into some compromised travel zoom. This is still a 70-200 f2.8. It's still the lens you bring when the job matters, when the light gets sketchy, and when the background needs to melt, and when you do not want your autofocus to have an existential crisis halfway through a shot. So here's the big question with the Nikon Z 70-200 f2.8 VRS2. Is this just a polite refresh with a Roman numeral glued on the side? Or is it actually a meaningful upgrade? By the end of this video, you'll know what Nikon changed, what matters in real-world shooting, and what still annoys me a little, and whether this is the kind of lens that makes sense for actual photographers or just for people who enjoy reading spec sheets like sci-fi novels. And to keep this grounded, I'm not going to waste your time pretending every improvement changes your life. Some do, some are nice to have, and some are the kind of thing you only appreciate after a few shoots, when the lens stops becoming a product and starts becoming part of your kit. In my case, I've shot this lens at 2 fitness competitions, at the zoo, and at a professional soccer game. So I've got a pretty good feel for how it holds up for events and fast-moving subjects in the real world. And yes, there are sample images, because otherwise this would just be me standing here making lens noises like a Star Trek door. And real quick, if you're newer to Nikon Z, or if you're still in that stage where the camera feels more complicated than it should, and you know there's more in there than you're getting out of it, that's exactly what my Nikon Z Bootcamp is for. It's built for the person who's tired of digging through menus, second-guessing settings, and wondering why the camera isn't giving them the results they thought it would. We go deeper on camera setup, autofocus settings, shooting workflow, and the practical stuff that helps you stop struggling and start feeling confident with your Nikon Z camera. And it's not just a pile of videos dumped in your lap and a cheerful little good luck. It's live on Zoom. It's a small class, and that means you can actually ask questions, get clarity, and work through the stuff that's tripping you up instead of trying to decode it alone at midnight while your camera judges you. The class size is small, and that's a big part of the value because it gives me room to actually help people instead of just broadcasting into the void. The next one starts May 14th. There are only a few spots left, and once it's full, that's it. So if you want in, sign up. Links in the description. Now, the headline change is obvious the moment you pick this lens up. This version drops a lot of weight compared to the previous one, landing in at about 998 grams or 2.2 pounds without the foot and collar, instead of roughly 1.36 kilograms or 3 pounds. That is a huge drop for a Pro 70-200, and it absolutely changes the feel of the lens in use. This isn't one of those tiny spec sheet diets you need a calculator to care about. It feels noticeably lighter in the hand, on the camera, and especially after a longer day of shooting. Now, lighter can sometimes mean less serious. You pick up a lens and you think, okay, what did they give up? But that doesn't really happen here. The build still feels like a proper Nikon S line lens. Internal zoom, solid controls, premium feel, weather seal design, all the things you'd expect from a lens at this level. It still feels like a workhorse. It's just no longer feels like it was forged inside a collapsing star. And then there's autofocus, which is where this lens starts to feel properly modern. Nikon moved from the older STM motor to the new Silky Swift voice coil motor system, and the result in use is faster, more precise, quieter focusing. It feels like a real autofocus upgrade, not a marketing footnote. Marketing claims are one thing, real shooting is another. What I noticed, and what really stood out, is that there is basically no noticeable delay to focus, even when the lens starts completely out of focus. That kind of snap matters more than a spreadsheet claim. It means the lens feels ready. It feels like the camera and lens are on the same page instead of passing notes through a substitute teacher. That matches exactly what I'm seeing. It just locks on fast, and more importantly, it feels fast in a way you actually trust. That confidence matters because a 70-200 isn't usually a casual lens. You're using it for events, portraits, indoor sports, wildlife at moderate distances, compressed landscapes, stage work, all of the stuff where you don't get 5 chances to politely ask your subject to do that again. When a lens feels instant, it changes how you shoot. You stop babysitting it. The handling changes are also smarter than they look at first. Nikon finally gave this lens a new collar and a foot design, built-in Arca-Swiss compatibility. And that's one of those big upgrades that sounds boring until you've spent years muttering at tripod blades. That's a very welcome improvement. It's cleaner, more convenient, and it feels like someone at Nikon finally listened to photographers instead of just engineers locked in a room with a whiteboard. Nikon also added the new click button on the lens, and that's really more useful for video shooters who want click control when changing aperture. If you shoot video, that gives you a more deliberate way to control those changes right on the lens. For still shooters, it's a nice to have, but it's probably not the headline feature. There's also a new look to the collar area when you remove it, and this is one of those small details that I genuinely appreciate. Nikon includes a protective sleeve or ring that covers the mounting area when the collar is off. It gives the lens a much more streamlined, finished look. It's a small touch, but on a lens like this, small touches matter. Now I will say this, it takes a few uses before swapping between the collar and that sleeve feels intuitive. The first couple of times you're definitely in that phase of rotating things and wondering whether you're about to unlock a hidden boss level, but once you understand it, it's no big deal. And the fact that Nikon bothered to solve the ugly collar removed problem at all is a win. There are a few other practical changes here too. One thing Nikon removed is the little top display screen from the earlier lens. For me, that's really no big deal. It never served much purpose unless you specifically wanted to know your exact focal length. And honestly, the only time I really paid attention to it was when I was doing reviews. In actual shooting, I never found myself missing it. There are a few other practical upgrades that make the lens more versatile. Minimum focus distance is now much better. Minimum focus distance is 0.38 meters at the wide end and 0.8 meters at 200mm, with maximum magnification up to 0.3x at 70 and 0.25 at 200. That's a real improvement over the original version, and it makes this lens feel more useful for tighter detail shots than you might expect from a classic 70-200. In real use, that gives the lens a little more range than the focal length alone suggests. Nikon also added filter access through the hood, which on paper is very photographer handy. If you use a polarizer or another rotating filter, being able to adjust it without pulling the hood off is genuinely useful. But here's where my experience gets a little less brochure ready. That little hood window opens on its own a little too easily for me. So yes, the feature is welcome. I'm glad it's there. I just wish it felt a little more secure. Because when something is supposed to be helpful, but keeps reminding you it exists, that's not ideal. Optically, this lens is doing what you'd hope a pro Nikon 70-200 would do. Nikon revised the optical formula, adding premium elements and coatings, and the lens is still delivering the kind of sharpness and contrast you'd expect in this class. And honestly, that part is almost the least surprising thing here. Nikon knows how to make a great 70-200. The more important point is that the lens doesn't feel like it traded performance for portability. It feels like Nikon tried to keep the performance and remove as much friction as possible from actually using it. There's one slightly funny side effect to making a 70-200 this light, and it shows up when you put it on a big body like the Z9. Because the lens is so light, the combo doesn't balance the way you might expect on a shoulder strap. The camera can hang downward more than usual with the lens pointing up. In other words, for once the lens isn't the anchor, the body is. That's not really a flaw so much as physics doing physics things, but it is something you notice. And honestly, I'd rather have that than haul around extra lens weight just to make the strap behave in a way that's emotionally satisfying. So where does that leave this lens? For me, the Nikon Z 70-200 f2.8 VRS2 feels like one of those rare updates that actually improves the ownership experience, not just the spec sheet. The lower weight matters every time you pick it up. The autofocus speed matters every time the subject moves. The new collar and sleeve system make the lens feel better throughout. The Arca-Swiss foot is the kind of change photographers have wanted for ages. The closer focusing is useful. The hood window is a good idea, even if I think it needs a firmer latch. And maybe most importantly, none of this feels gimmicky. The lens feels like Nikon looked at a very good 70-200 and asked, okay, what actually makes this easier, faster, and nicer to live with for real photographers? Not in a lab, not in a launch video, in actual use. If you've already loved the idea of a 70-200 but hated the part where it felt like carrying a small moon, this lens is going to make a lot of sense. If you shoot portraits, events, action, travel assignments, where every ounce matters, or you just want your pro zoom to feel more responsive and less burdensome, this is a seriously compelling update. And that's really the best compliment I can give it. The Nikon Z 70-200 f2.8 VRS2 doesn't feel like Nikon reinvented the 70-200. It feels like they refined the parts photographers actually care about, which in camera gear terms is about as close as you get to a sequel that actually improves the original. If this helped you figure out whether this lens belongs in your bag, and you want more Nikon Z real-world reviews and setup help, check out the bootcamp. That's where I go deeper on the stuff that's hard to cover in one YouTube video, like camera setup, autofocus settings, real-world shooting workflow, and the kinds of practical Nikon Z decisions that can save you a lot of trial and error. You can also join the Nikon Z Facebook group if you want to keep the conversation going. Ask questions and see what other Nikon shooters are working through. And if you want something quick and useful right away, grab the free Nikon Z Quick Setup Guide. The link is in the description. And I'm curious, if you were using a 70-200 for your kind of shooting, what would matter more to you here? The lower weight, the faster autofocus, or the improved tripod collar setup? Let me know in the comments, because this is exactly the kind of lens that sounds incremental on paper and then quietly changes how enjoyable your camera is to use.